Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Consider this. A tree falls in the forest, but there's nobody around to hear it. Does it make a sound? Did it even fall at all? Is there even a forest? You know, I tried to make a video about this last night, and it really sucked, and so I stopped. I was really tired. It just wasn't coming out well. And I'm glad it didn't because, I posted kind of like a rough draft of it in this RPG Techniques group that I've been involved in. And Anthony already started the subject a couple days ago. And since I actually posted that there were so many more people joining the discussion that I have a lot more perspectives, a lot more greater understanding of the subject and how many different ways it can go. So I'm glad that I didn't post the original video because I've had my perspectives broadened. And so this is probably going to be I hope it's not rambly or too long, but it's a really provocative subject. I made a video a couple days ago talking about how oftentimes we miss or misinterpret things as players in games, and sometimes it's in Google Hangouts, sometimes it's in face-to-face games. What happens then? Anthony kind of introduced the idea of do you correct people on this misinformation? And we got into a lot of discussions about the kind of collaborative nature, what level of improv that we're talking about, whether we're in a group that's focusing more on characters or groups that are focusing more on the story, for lack of a better word, all that kind of stuff. So I think the first thing that I'd like to do just to make the subject or discussion a little easier, at least in my own mind, is I think I can divide these misinterpretations or misunderstandings into two really broad camps. The first one is you miss something as a player. It could be that you're on your phone. It could be that the game master's on item number 10, and he mentioned this in number 1. It's kind of just you've forgotten about it at that point. For whatever reason, you miss it, but it's something that you miss as a player, but your character manifestly would not have missed. Maybe it's because it's just so big and so obvious that everybody can know there's this giant elephant in the room, or it's something that as Murder Bunny brought up maybe like 20 minutes ago, the idea that your character is just that perceptive, just has that level of empathy, whatever it is that at least your guy would know this was true, and as a result you're not making an informed decision. And it behooves us, I believe, as game masters to once we realize that this is the case, to kind of correct that schism between understanding of the reality at that moment, to kind of realign it. And because you would have made a different decision. Here's the idea: you missed for whatever reason. There's this big giant rock to your left. You're playing Hollow Earth Expedition. The Nazis unshoulder their weapons, and you decide you're going to run at them guns blazing when they start shooting, as opposed to ducking behind the rock for a while, considering your next move and taking shots when you have some advantage. And these are the points I think I almost think of them as Regis Philbin moments. Is that your final answer? I had this happen just the other day in the Lamentations of the Flame Princess game, the one in Prussia. That was you can actually watch it on YouTube if you want to, where session 3 and the characters, I think it happened a couple times in the game, but this is the funniest one, where they just lost track of time. It could have been because I just said that a while ago, and I thought I was being clear enough, but I'm kind of giving this, it's this time now, it's that time now, and at some point they discovered that there might be some information at this Lutheran church, and they declared they want to go to this Lutheran church right now to look at the records to see what this church did to a cult 50 years ago. And so I kind of smile and say, well, you're going to do that at 11 o'clock at night, right? And Jason actually says, of course Jurgen does. It'd be great. We can break in. And the other Lee and Josh are like, no, it's cold. We're tired. It's late, and we don't want to get arrested for breaking into a church. I'd rather go when talk to the vicar during the day like civilized folk. So it's that moment where for me it's my preferred method to kind of gently introduce that back into the player's understanding. Although sometimes you have to just stop the game and be a little bit more blunt. Oh, you didn't quite catch the fact there was this big rock next to you? Whatever happens to be. Timing is everything with any of these reality schism corrections. Because the longer it goes on, the worse your retconning has to be. It just jars the suspension of disbelief in a lot of ways, and can sometimes just lead to some very bad scenarios. But to me the larger, probably the fuzzier, maybe even more problematic in some ways, group of misinterpretations or misunderstandings are the things where it's just something that the player misinterprets, but it's entirely plausible, very likely, that the character might have misinterpreted or missed. And we had some examples of this happen recently. I was playing in Anthony's All-for-One Regime Diabolique game, He mentions the fact that the moon is not full. You know, we're riding to the house of the Bouvet werewolf and the Bouvet cult, and he mentions the moon's not full. It's half illuminated, half dark. You know, whatever that's called, I forget. But for whatever reason, I missed the significance of that as a player. You know, in an all-for-one regime diabolique, werewolves change when the moon is full, and that's it. It's not like old school D&D where they can change whenever they want to, but they have to change when the moon's full. Something like that. You know, I just missed that, and my character misses that. But it's very plausible that Philippe would have just not made that connection. So it really didn't bother me. It changed, you know, what happened a little bit. It changed my perception and Philippe's perception going in there, because Philippe was kind of, he made his peace with the idea that he was going to go maybe fight to the death with his friend Jean-Marie, and he might get very hurt, he might die. He didn't think all of them were coming back. So it changed, you know, kind of like perceptions of what happened in the game more than anything else. But let's take this other example where you miss something. You know, say once again you're playing Hollow Earth Expedition, right? And you and your companions have this person of interest on your radar. Maybe it's somebody you've had run-ins with before, it's somebody you suspect of something, maybe evidence is pointed this person is involved in some kind of nefarious plots, whatever it happens to be. But in the course of the game, you miss or misinterpret some cues from NPCs, some pieces of information, or things that just, you don't see the significance of them. You look at that moon that's half full, and you just don't recognize it for what it is. And as a result, you're in this train station, and you just don't understand the fact that this person of interest, non-player character, is also in that train station. And if you go look for them, you might be able to apprehend them. And so what happens? Well, immediately you go home. Nothing happens to your character. But this person of interest, they get on a train, they take it to another country, and a week later they assassinate the leader of that country. As a result, that area of the world destabilizes, and there's a snowball effect. Now, what happens, you know, in terms of like the player's version of the world, or you know what part of the game world the players are really involved in, the focal point. Well, it could depend. Like maybe the players actually got on a boat, the player characters got on a boat and went to America. Maybe they were in England. They went to America, so they're really far removed from what's going on. Or maybe what happened was that this destabilization in this other country maybe devalued the pound for a while. Or maybe it got to the point where that country declared war on England, you know, where the characters are. And so it had a very big effect. But, and here's the kicker, because they weren't aware of that missed opportunity, does that make that missed opportunity any less real? Even if they went to America and they're very far removed from what's going on. Something that, you know, there could have been a butterfly effect. They could have changed those events. And it was due to a missed piece of information, a misinterpretation. You know, to me, I keep on thinking of, you know, they're digging in the wrong place. Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know, the Nazis get half the information as when the information on the medallion gets burned into the Nazis' hand, and then when they build their staff of Ra, you know, it's just shining in the wrong place because the staff is too tall. Nazis are digging in the wrong place. Very often, as players, our characters end up digging in the wrong place because we've missed or misinterpreted some little piece of information. At that point, is it necessary for the game master to correct them if it's something that plausibly could have happened? You know, there's a I think maybe a hierarchy might not be the right word, but there's different levels of like how important is this piece of information. And you know, as a result of that discussion, we started talking about like, you know, what do you introduce into a scene as a game master as you're explaining what's going on? You know, what details do you give the players? You know, whether it's how dark is it in that well, or you know how many people are in this bar. What is the physical structure of this building really like? How much are you giving the players right away? And if you're not giving the players those pieces of information, is that reality up for grabs at that particular point? Can the players start to fill in the gaps, and what they say, is that now real? Or are there things sometimes when a player says, okay, well, you know, it looks like I can see all the way down here, or there, you know, because there's nobody in the bar, so I'm going to hold up the bartender. Is it important enough that the game master has to say, wait a minute, well, there are 40 people in this bar? You have to, at that point, you kind of yank back narrative control from the player. You know, what parts of if you know, here was one of the interesting questions. I told you this is going to get rambly for a second, but is the lack of detail that is given to the players in any particular moment. You know, because there's a lack of narration. Is that a narration of lack? You know, there isn't anybody in this bar. Why? Because I never said there was any in the bar as a game master. At one point, are the players and their characters assuming, or the players are assuming things might be true just because the game master didn't mention them. This gets to where the game dynamics can get really fuzzy, and it depends upon the group. And I've had this experience happen very recently in my 2 Lamentations of the Flame Princess groups. Playing with these 2 groups, it's same game, same system, same setting, except they're in a different country starting out. But I've got 2 different groups of people, and as we were both 3 sessions in, as I'm getting more comfortable with both groups, 2 very different dynamics are going on. And one group tends to be a lot more focused on characters, and the other group is a little bit more focused on story. And I'm finding over time I'm changing my style with those 2 groups to just kind of fit the groups a little bit. And a lot of it has been kind of unconscious. And I think if we want to talk about like better ways to play, like Runesinger and Samuel G were talking about a long time ago, I think part of that might be really just being a little bit more conscious of what's going on in the group, because there's this time all of a sudden where there's part of the game world reality that's improv, and it's not set in stone. I've given you these important details as a game master. Set the scene. The other stuff that I haven't really talked about, what color are the walls, maybe are there rafters or not rafters, how many patrons are in this bar, how cold is it outside, etc. There are details that maybe, one group of players can just kind of improvise. The other group of players might not improvise. Or what levels of details. One group might be really into, just kind of saying, well, I think I can see at the bottom of this well, where the other group says, well, silver weighs exactly this much, and I think I can make this much here, and they're a little bit more about numbers and facts and figures. There's a lot more improv where they say, well, this in fact is objectively true at that point. And there's many parts in these 2 sections of different examples of improv where, as a game master, I relinquish control in one way or another because it's really not that important. Okay, yeah, you can fill in that detail. Every once in a while, oh wait, there's this one important piece of information here. Sometimes, and here's where it gets tricky in terms of missing information and misinterpretation. There's times when, as a game master, that just because I didn't say something doesn't necessarily mean that there's not a moment where I have to kind of yank back control and say, yeah, this one particular part of the game world reality, well, that's mine. And it's not a control thing, or I am the great game master and referee, and I shall tell you what is the truth. It's more like, oh yeah, this one little piece here, that's important. And just because I didn't explicitly say in the beginning, doesn't mean I can't as a referee, I can't yank back narrative authority as we're doing this improv or some level of improv and say, yeah, this one particular detail right here, yeah, the floor is breaking because the silver's that heavy, whatever it might happen to be. But really, really interesting topic, because it starts to get into the subject of what's objectively true in a game world. We are talking about something that's fictional. This is real, just in case you weren't clear on that. However, there is a level of maybe you in a camp where you prefer to have a strict game world reality. This is objectively true. Just because you didn't notice that this assassin was in the train station doesn't mean that assassin never existed. He went and he assassinated that person. That assassination happened, whether or not you choose to focus on it or not. And there's other, maybe school of thought isn't the right word, but people that prefer a game where it's a little bit, a lot more improvisational, where things aren't necessarily completely etched in stone. I'm finding a lot of that happening in my 2 different groups, where things tend to be a lot more concrete in the Lamentations in London group, the one that's, the Lamentations in Prussia group, the one that's actually on YouTube, but the one that's face-to-face that I don't record. Parts of the game world reality, on my side of the screen, there's no screen, but on my side of the table, are a little bit different. I'm improving a little bit more. And there's reasons for that, just the way the group dynamic is. And so sometimes, some of the things that they say influence that reality a little bit more, and sometimes I'm actually altering game world reality to move the story forward more. So there's not quite the same level of objective reality in that game that there is in the Lamentations of Prussia game, if that makes any sense. As a result of that, though, they can say things where I don't necessarily need to correct them because they're not necessarily missing or misinterpreting things. And like I said, this is going to get rambly, so I'll probably cut the video off here now because there's a lot more to it. But to me it's a fascinating subject. So yes, at the end of the day, a lot of times you're just digging in the wrong place. Does a tree make a sound? Sometimes it does. Sometimes there really wasn't a forest at all. But for the most part, I believe there's a forest. You know. Anyhow, what do you think about all that?